I am proud to announce that our guest speaker today is retired Dodge County Circuit Judge Daniel Klossner. From 1969 to 1971, he served in the U.S. Army in the 25th Infantry Division. In 1970, he was wounded in Vietnam, where he received the Purple Heart. Judge Klossner.
It is an extreme pleasure to be here again. I was telling somebody today, I think this is the 27th out of the last 30 years that I've given a speech at Memorial Day. And every community does it different, but every community says the same thing. Thank you to our veterans. Thank you for those who gave their lives. When I was in the military service in the 60s, we weren't thanked too much for anything we did. And now the scene has changed. So let's give these members of the armed services a round of applause for their service to us. Gold Star mothers and families, members of the armed services, fellow veterans, ladies and gentlemen. We pause on this traditional Memorial Day of May 30th to pay our solemn respect to the men and women who gave their lives for our nation and its ideals. We say our prayers of thanks for what we have and what we have kept for over 200 years. Many of the last 30 years I've given a Memorial Day speech. I'm always looking to say thank you and give my solemn respects for those who gave up their lives in a new way. I find inspiration in many places. This year I found it in the Military Order of the Purple Heart magazine. Although they are not my exact words, I believe they remind us of why we come to places like this all over our great nation to say, yes, we remember you. Shifty died January 17th, one here paying homage to another. Shifty volunteered for the Airborne in World War II and served with Easy Company of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, part of the 101st Airborne Infantry. If you've seen the Band of Brothers on HBO or the History Channel, you know Shifty. His character appears in all 10 episodes, and Shifty himself is interviewed in several of them. I met Shifty in the Philadelphia airport several years ago. I didn't know who he was at the time. I just saw an elderly gentleman having trouble reading his ticket. I offered him help and assured him that he was at the right gate. And I noticed the Screaming Eagle, the symbol of the 101st Airborne, on his hat. Making conversation, I asked him if he'd been in the 101st Airborne or if his son was serving. He said quietly that he'd been in the 101st. I thanked him for his service, then asked him when he served and how many jumps he made. Quietly and humbly he said, well, I guess I signed up in 1941 or so and was in until sometimes in 1945. At that point, very humbly he said, I made the 5 training jumps at Tokwa and then jumped into Normandy. Do you know where Normandy is? At this point, my heart stopped. I told him, yes, I know exactly where Normandy is, and I know what D-Day was. At that point, he said, I also made a second jump into Holland, into Arnhem. I was standing with a genuine war hero, and then I realized that it was June, just after the anniversary of D-Day. I asked Shifty if he was on his way back from France, and he said yes. And it's real sad because these days, so few of the guys are left, and those that are, lots of them can't make the trip. My heart was in my throat, and I didn't know what to say. I helped Shifty get onto the plane, and then realized he was back in coach while I was in first class. I sent the flight attendant back to get him and said that I wanted to switch seats. When Shifty came forward, I got up out of the seat and told him I wanted him to have it. And he said, "No, son, you enjoy that seat. Just knowing that there are still some who remember what we did and who still care enough to make an old man very proud and happy." His eyes were filling up as he said it, and mine are brimming now as I write this. Shifty died January 17th after fighting cancer. There was no parade, no big event in the Staples Center, no wall-to-wall, back-to-back, 24/7 news coverage, no weeping fans on television, and that's not right. Let's give Shifty his own memorial service in our own quiet way. Rest peacefully, Shifty. Let's all remember him. Signed, Chuck Yeager, Major General, retired. As we say rest in peace to Shifty, we also say rest in peace to many, many others, including Private First Class Jacob A. Gasson, Private First Class Ryan Contafio, Sergeant Kirk Straszewski, 3 young men whose lives were cut short, honoring the ideals for which this country stands. I still remember, and it comes to mind every time I hear taps, the man from New York who I was working on as a medic in Vietnam who died, and I was unable to save him, I'm sorry to say. Every time I hear taps, his face comes to my mind. He's the one and the biggest one that I remember. Of course, I remember others. So every time you hear taps played or see that marching band go down the street or come to this cemetery, we remember. We remember all the people whose names are on this wall and whose names are not on this wall. We remember the people who are buried overseas. We remember the people who are buried at sea. We give our thanks and pray for the prisoners of war and the MIAs. Don't stop praying for them. They need all of our prayers. And I would like to think that all of this nation's war heroes stands for what is called the final inspection. The soldier stood and faced God, which must always come to pass. He hoped his shoes were shining just as brightly as his brass. Step forward now, soldier. How shall I deal with you? Have you always turned the other cheek? To my church have you been true? The soldier squared his shoulders and said, "No, Lord, I guess I have not, because those of us who carry guns can't always be a saint. I've had to work most Sundays, and at times my talk was tough, and sometimes I've been violent because the world is awfully rough. But I never took a penny that wasn't mine to keep, though I worked a lot of overtime when the bills just got too steep. And I never passed a cry for help. Tough at times, I shook with fear, and sometimes, God forgive me, I have wept unmanly tears. I know I don't deserve a place among the people there. They never wanted me around, except to calm their fears. If you've a place for me here, Lord, it needn't be so grand. I've never expected or had too much, but if you don't, I'll understand." There was a silence all around the throne where the saints had often trod, as a soldier waited quietly for the judgment of his God. Step forward now, you soldier. You've borne your burdens well. Walk peaceably on Heaven Street. You've done your time in hell. Let's now give all the war heroes a memorial service each and every day in our own way and quietly say thank you, and yes, we remember you. Thank you for allowing me to come today. Have a happy Memorial Day.